Welcome to the Cybele Health Podcast, where we share science-backed tools and expert insights to empower women's health and elevate their lives.
Welcome to the Cybele Health Podcast. I am Dr. Dustin Weissman, and today I'm honored to speak with Dr. Jeff Zeig, founder and director of the Milton H. Erickson Foundation, and one of the world's leading experts in psychotherapy and hypnosis. A student of Dr. Milton Erickson himself, Dr. Zeig has spent decades advancing Ericksonian principles and teaching the art of evocative communication. He'll be presenting 2 sessions at the upcoming Evolution of Psychotherapy conference, Evocative Approaches to Psychotherapy, and an Introduction to Hypnosis and Ericksonian Orientation. Today, we'll dive into both topics and explore how his approach helps therapists move beyond information to evoke transformation. So, Dr. Zeig, thank you so much for appearing on our podcast today. It's a pleasure to have you.
I'm honored.
So I'm going to jump right into it. So you mentioned that you often contrast evocative with informative with regards to communication. So could you explain what makes evocative communication so essential for change in psychotherapy and why information alone is not enough?
Well, information is the way that we learn to be therapists, where we learn theories, we learn techniques, we learn a model of how to practice psychotherapy. But when we're in the actual room with a patient, informing someone, you can inform someone that they should be happy, but whether or not that leads them to be happy or effective or motivated is a whole different story. So when we want to stimulate something where our approach is this way rather than this way, when we're learning something, learning mathematics, we learn formulas, we learn rules, and we learn equations. But when we want to do something with ourselves, to be happy, to be motivated, to be curious, to be connected, that's something that happens from this kind of approach rather than this kind of approach. And so hypnosis is something that can't be informed. You can explain to somebody, you can focus your attention, you can pay attention to internal processes, you can notice something that's different in your environment, but that doesn't really get somebody into trance. So trance is elicited, and that serves as a model for some of the products that need to happen in psychotherapy, where we want somebody to find a resource within themselves rather than informing them that they have a resource inside themselves. We need to evoke a realization that you can be connected, curious, compassionate, and the rules of engagement are different when you want to inform, when you want to elicit.
Yeah, and I think expanding on that, at least my interpretation of it would be metaphors, which is big for you and me. That metaphor seems central in your work. So I'm wondering, how do metaphors help clients realize insights or emotional states that direct explanations can't help them reach?
Yeah, well, you can communicate things in metaphor that can't be communicated the same way by informative communication. You say to somebody that you're solid and you're speaking metaphorically. You say to somebody that your head is in the clouds and you're speaking metaphorically to someone, and you want them to get a realization rather than an intellectual understanding. So metaphor is a way to prompt a realization, and metaphor is something that we're all familiar with because we all have some literary background, and so some things can be communicated directly, some things are better stimulated into play, and metaphor is one example of stimulating something into play.
Absolutely. And then you refer to therapy as an experiential art, that clients will change by the experiences they live. How can therapists create evocative, lived experiences even with a single session?
Yeah, well, that becomes the art of doing psychotherapy. And there's no singular rule for that, but we all have artistic endeavors. We all play music, or we go to the movies, or we read novels. So the novelist doesn't tell you what to think or feel. The novelist weaves a story to elicit a realization about life for you. The same thing with going to the movies. You're not the movie isn't explained to you. You have an opportunity to realize something of importance, of personal meaning as you watch the movie. So we all have the capacity for communicating directly, mathematically, and we all have the capacity for communicating metaphorically, stimulating a realization into play. And when it comes to psychotherapy, it started more as a science of how to communicate to the client important understandings. But there's some things that just can't be communicated directly and have to be realized experientially. And hypnosis is one of those things. Hypnosis serves as a model because it's a way of prompting somebody to realize that they changed their state. Now, if somebody realized they changed their state once to go from a state of active awareness to a state of hypnosis, they can change from a state of depression to a state of happiness. So hypnosis serves as a model for how to help people to realize something rather than to inform them. Now, you went to graduate school, I went to graduate school, we learned theories, we learned techniques, we learned approaches to psychotherapy, and mostly what we learned is an informational process. But when we're actually in a room with a client, if we can get them there by explaining, you can change your negative thoughts into positive thoughts, and the person says, "Oh, I didn't realize that," and they say, "Okay, now I'm happy." Everything is fine, but there has to be a transformative moment where the person realizes they can accomplish something that they thought was out of their ability, and they have a resource that exists inside them that they hadn't perfectly realized before. So psychotherapy is more of an art, in my estimation, than it is a science. We all want our work to be scientifically valid, of course, but the goals that clients have are not normally scientific goals. They're more experiential goals: to be in love, to be meaningful, to be present, to be motivated. And those challenges can't be prompted by a series of linear steps. They have to be realized, and we all have the capacity to realize things, and that's the essence of hypnosis. It's a form of realization rather than a form of presenting information. If we could just present information to the client and they could be happy, we would have a much easier task. There wouldn't be any artistry to doing psychotherapy. It would just be explaining to the client what they need to do and say, "Go ahead and do it now." But life doesn't work according to some linear formula.
Yeah, well, if it did, then AI would have definitely passed us by now.
Yeah.
But I absolutely agree with the art of the practice of therapy and being able to be flexible. You mentioned in your work that you emphasize the importance of orienting toward in evocative communication. And I'm wondering, what does it mean to orient toward a patient? And how does that differ from standard empathic listening?
Well, a standard empathic listening is a way of establishing a relationship with someone. So you can say to someone, "You're sad right now," or "You're anxious right now," or you can say to someone, "You're jumpy right now," or "You're feeling heavy right now." And so we want to communicate as effectively as we can with the client. So if we can just get there by presenting information, a didactic approach, then no problem. Orienting toward is to stimulate something into play. And music stimulates a feeling into play, poetry, novels. These are part of the artistry of literature in the broadest sense of the word. Shakespeare doesn't tell you what to feel. He just gives you an opportunity to live the drama and to come to some conclusion about jealousy or family life. And so it's just that there's some things that can be learned didactically and some things that have to be learned experientially. You can explain to somebody how to balance on a bicycle, but it's not going to help them ride it. They have to actually get on the bicycle and ride and get the felt sense of balance in order to move forward on the bicycle.
Yeah, I imagine that's similar with our training, right? You said in graduate school, you can read all the information and the theories, but until you actually go and you get supervision and in your training, then that's when you get this practice that you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. Psychotherapy in graduate school, at least in my graduate school, was learned more by a series of rules and procedures. And you had to have the right procedure for what do you do with a patient with depression compared to a patient with anxiety, compared to a patient with a fractured relationship. So then it would be nice if we could make rules for all of these things, and the rules would be a standard, and you could just follow the rules and work a series of steps, and the patient would be fine. But life is much more complicated than that, and there has to be an understanding that both respects the scientific model, the didactic linear model, and also makes a place for an artistic model, an orienting toward model. If you can get the person by straightened out by being very clear and linear, then do that, and that's the only process that you need. But if somebody needs to realize something rather than formulaically understand something, then we're orienting toward, excuse me, to awaken a realization.
Oh, okay. I'm also wondering, in your work, you mentioned limbic communication that reaches the emotional brain. How can therapists cultivate limbic communication through tone, gesture, and presence?
Well, it's a matter of practice. You can say to somebody, you can be more open in your relationships. You can say to somebody, you can be more like this in your relationships, and give somebody a visual, implicit model that allows them to challenge themselves to discover what the procedure will be. So we need science, and science helps us to understand the knowable world, but we also have the capacity for art, which helps us to get an experiential realization of what the processes are that guide us and motivate us and charm us. And therapy needs to have an opportunity for both processes to happen, that there can be didactic processes and there can be experiential processes. And you can't learn to ride a bicycle by knowing the rules of balance. You have to experience it, and it's an intuitive sense that you're balanced, you can move forward.
Yeah, I love that, the experiential aspect of it, that you can talk about it in therapy all you want, but until you actually do it, that's when you'll see the change. That's why I've had supervisors in the past say, 90% of therapy happens outside the office. You're just saying the framework in the office. So it's much in line with what you're saying on experiential.
I would agree with
Yep. Yeah. So you said you mentioned hypnosis, and you've said in your work previously that it provides a foundation for evocative approaches because trance cannot be informed; it must be realized. So I'm wondering, how does this principle inform non-hypnotic psychotherapy as well?
Well, hypnosis serves as a model for how to help somebody to realize trance. Well, to help somebody to realize motivation or curiosity or connection, it's still a process of realizing. When we want somebody to realize something, we use processes that are more in the world of art than are in the world of science. When we want to have somebody to have distinguishable knowledge, a set of steps, algorithmic series of steps to get from point A to point B, then we're in the world of science. So I don't want to negate science by any means. I'm trained scientifically as well as experientially. It's just when you're with a client and you're hoping to stimulate a realization, that you rely on your command of literature or music or poetry, whatever your art form is, serves as a guide for how to stimulate things. if you want to learn about love, you can explain it to somebody, what is the characteristics of love, but you need to feel it. You need to really understand it. You need to be in the state to get a considerable jump on what love is about. So we all have our areas of artistic competence. I'm not very good at playing the piano. I can hack out a few tunes, but I understand that the essence of music is to get you to feel something and to just have the sense of something, which could be enthusiasm, excitement, love, connection. And so it's a matter of knowing that we can use our artistic artistic bent as well as our scientific bent, and that they're two separate domains. As I'm portraying them right now, there's certainly overlap between them, but I'm just trying to separate them and say that therapists all know something about art, and we all have the art that we subscribe to or believe in, and we can use some of the methods that we learned about art when we want to stimulate a realization in a client. Poetry doesn't tell you to feel love, but if you attend to one of Shakespeare's sonnets, you may get the realization of what love can be about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good way of putting it. And yeah, we might not clearly see it. I like how you are separating, but acknowledging that they're still both involved in the process.
Right.
Yeah. Wondering, in your exercises, you invite therapists to use sculpting, sounds, and gestures as metaphors. What advice would you give clinicians who want to integrate these artistic and sensory dimensions into their own practice?
Well, it's using the totality of communication, not just my words to your ears and your words to my ears, but communication is a robust form of sharing information. So if I say to a client, you can be like this in your relationships, or you can be like this in your work, I'm communicating something that I want the person to realize by using a visual image. That psychotherapy does not just need to appeal to the ears, but it can appeal to the eyes. And so how you shape the message that you want the person to hopefully realize can be done visually, auditorily, or metaphorically. And it's just a matter of experimenting to try to find a way in which the essence of the understanding becomes fulminant in the client and reaches a point where the client can actualize it in the practice of their life.
Well, I did just recently hear about a study that said dancing was one of the more effective modalities for feeling better. So maybe we gotta just get up in the room and gesture with our hips.
Well, I'm not much of a dancer, so I don't rely on that particular art, but I suppose that there would be a shape for it too to get across a message. It's consolidating. Like, what is the message that you want the person to realize? What's the
Yes.
message that you want the person to understand? If there's something
Hmm.
to understand, just explain it logically. If there's something
Hmm.
the person needs to realize, then we're using artistic forms of communication. And we
Yeah.
all have arts that we believe in and that we subscribe to, and we all use metaphor frequently in our communication. But metaphor has not been something that has been part of the art of being a psychotherapist. Therapists are not trained to think metaphorically, but novelists, certainly poets, are certainly trained to think metaphorically. And that's an opportunity to get somebody to realize something rather than understand something.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to transition a little bit more to the second talk you're going to have that's more on hypnosis. And then in your book, you describe hypnosis as, again, something elicited rather than induced. Can you explain this distinction and why the idea of elicitation better captures the essence of Ericksonian hypnosis?
Well, say, what is a hypnotic state? Well, some people, if they focus their attention, they say, I'm hypnotized. Other people, if they change their sensation, if there's a profound feeling of relaxation or a profound feeling of warmth, they say, I'm hypnotized. Other people say that they're hypnotized when they're not aware of something. They're not
Mm.
aware of sights in the room. They're so totally focused on something. So if you say to somebody, focus your attention, pay attention to sensations, notice changes in your perception. You can't really do those things consciously. They have to be stimulated. So the induction is an opportunity to stimulate the realization of a change in state. So if you can change your state once and go from a state of being profoundly anxious to a state of being present, you can change your state twice. And so hypnosis serves as a model of being able to alter your state and go from one state to another state. And that serves as a model for being able to elicit changes in state that are adaptive in somebody's life.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then you propose the ARE or R model, absorb, ratify, and elicit,
Yes,
as a flexible framework for hypnosis. I'm
yes.
wondering, could you walk us through these three stages and how a therapist might use them in a session?
Well, that is an induction model, and it's meant to provide a structural framework. So it would be like, as you're talking with me, you can notice the blinking of my eyes, you can notice the movement of my hands, you can pay
Mm.
attention to the color of the shirt that I'm wearing. You can notice things that can be interesting to you and that capture your imagination, that capture your attention. Now, I'm weaving the beginnings of an induction by focusing your attention, absorbing in something. Some people would say that they're hypnotized if they're absorbed in the details, possibilities, in the present tense of some phenomena. Other
Mm.
people would say that they're hypnotized when they notice changes that happen in their perception or in their behavior. The ARE is a model for teaching people about fundamentals of hypnosis. That the induction, when I learned hypnosis in the 1970s, I was learning induction techniques, and I would just memorize this induction technique
Mm.
and deliver the induction technique like Richard Burton reciting Shakespeare, and try to do it with some flair to promote a structure for a person to realize induction. Now, because people say that they're hypnotized when they're absorbed in details, possibilities in the present tense, the absorption factor allows the person to have that focus. And once the person is focused, we ratify the changes. As
Mm.
as we're talking, you don't pay attention to the picture that you may see in your screen behind you. You don't pay attention to the sensations that you're being supported by the chair. You don't pay attention to the posture of your body, that you've moved forward in space, perhaps even forward in time. You don't notice that the blinking of your eyes has changed in frequency and rhythm. And there are certain changes that happen as your body experiences you as being more presently absorbed in the moment. So ARE is a formula for creating an induction: absorb in details, possibilities in the present tense, ratify the changes that happen as the person becomes absorbed, and elicit responses, probably dissociative responses, and elicit resources. So this is a formulaic um, summary of what a good hypnotic session would be like, and just serves as a reminder to people doing hypnosis that they don't have to memorize a script. When I
Mhm.
started doing hypnosis in the 1970s, I memorized scripts as if there was an induction technique, and I was just the person who received the induction script and was going to use that on all clients. But when you understand what it is that you're trying to elicit, a change in absorption, a change in perception, and understanding of the situation as being a hypnotic situation, this is the ARE model: absorb, ratify, elicit.
Mhm.
And so you have to have something that explains to students what it is that they're doing. And ARE is a soft version of an elicitation model rather than a scripted procedure.
Okay. Yeah, that's I think that's a really way of thinking about it, because when you first start it, you don't really know what to do. And it's through the experience that you start to see and feel what you're, eliciting, and then it comes more naturally, I assume, at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you could say to somebody, laugh, and direct them to feel a sense of humor. But really, laughter is something that's stimulated. You tell somebody a joke, and they
Hmm.
have the opportunity to laugh in response. So the induction is like the joke, and you want somebody to be stimulated into the realization that they can change their state. If they can change their state once, they can change their state in a more adaptive way twice, and perhaps accomplishing the goals that they are designed to accomplish by virtue of coming to psychotherapy.
Yeah. And then you often reference Erickson's use of truisms, also yes sets and persuasive language. How can therapists use these communication patterns ethically to promote therapeutic responsiveness and self-discovery?
Yeah. Well, as you get deeper into the absorb phase of hypnosis, there are
Hmm.
language forms that are especially designed for building absorption and building responsiveness. So a yes set is a series of statements that are true that lead to a statement that could be true, but is
Mm.
more experiential. You're here,
Okay.
listening, you're understanding my words, and you can use my words to deepen your sense of being absorbed in the moment.
Mm.
So that's a yes set. Yes, you can do this. Yes, you can do this. Yes, you can do this, and possibly yes, you can do that. So we learn to create language forms that are out of the ordinary, because we don't walk around saying to people sets of three observable things that they can think yes to, followed by
Hmm.
something that they can think yes to possibly. And so uh, in order to prompt the realization of a change in state, we're okay?
Yep. Still okay.
Okay. In order to prompt the realization of a change in state, you need to use language forms that are a little unusual, but it's the
Hmm.
same thing with poetry, and you're using language forms that are a little unusual and not
Hmm.
terribly uncommon to normal human communication, but are specific to the poetic enterprise. So using yes sets and dissociation statements and um, implied causatives, and there's a whole host of language forms that once you start studying hypnosis, you learn to structure these different language forms in order to prompt a realization rather than inform a fact.
Hmm. And you've talked about how hypnosis can be embedded with ordinary therapeutic dialogue. What are some subtle ways clinicians can weave hypnotic principles into conversation without formal inductions?
Well, that was the art of Erickson, and I'm not Erickson, so I don't have the ability to do those things in the natural way that he did them. But
Mhm.
hypnosis serves as a model of a way of communicating that is based in stimulating realizations. And once you learn that for induction, then the idea is to apply that in everyday communication. So it was hard to distinguish, was Erickson doing hypnosis or was he doing psychotherapy? And if he was doing psychotherapy, was he being experiential like he was when he was doing a trance? And probably he was. So the understanding from hypnosis weaved its way into the warp and woof of communication without the necessity of doing the formal induction. The induction just serves as a marker. Now we're talking and having the conversation and talking about ideas. Now we're realizing things, and we're realizing concepts, and we're realizing perceptions, and we're realizing relational patterns. So hypnosis is a model of how to help people realize something rather than informing them. If you want to sum numbers, how much is 2 + 2 + 2, it's easy to instruct somebody about how to sum numbers. But if you want to be happy, motivated, curious, desirous of summing numbers, then you're in a different realm of human experience. And so I advise therapists of all ilks to learn something about hypnosis, because it serves as this experiential model of helping somebody to realize something rather than informing something. It would be nice if you could just say, change your negative thoughts to positive thoughts. And people said, oh, I never thought about that. And of course, I'll do it. And there's no need for therapy. I'm just going to change my negative thoughts to positive thoughts. If we could work that way as by design, then there wouldn't be much art to psychotherapy. We would just be teachers and providing procedures whereby people could make their way forward in life by virtue of understanding the rules that governed communication and relationships. But because life is a little bit more complicated, and we have art, and everybody has their own art. Some people are writers, some people are poets, some people are musicians, some people are appreciative of the art of others. And it's a matter of understanding, when do we want to use artistic communication? When do we want to use informative communication? If you can get the person to go from point A to point B by using informative communication, by all means do that, and do that first. And if there's some reticence or some resistance to getting there, then we need to know that there are other ways of communicating that can prompt a change in state, a change in realization, a change in relationship patterns. And then we're relying on art, and we're not just relying on science.
Yeah. So you've studied directly with Milton Erickson and have carried his legacy forward through the Erickson Foundation. How has your personal understanding of hypnosis evolved, maybe more from what you've already told us, since those early years? And how do you see the field changing today?
Well, Erickson was a formative figure in the history of hypnosis. So as hypnosis started, it was more like this. You were giving suggestions into a passive person. Every day you'll be doing better and better. And with Erickson, it was more the stimulating something into play. And he served as a model of elicitation rather than as a model of informing. And Erickson's genius can't be replicated. I haven't seen anybody who can do the things that I would be able to see Erickson doing. And the model that most closely mirrors what Erickson was capable of would be Shakespeare or Steven Spielberg or Stephen King, somebody who is capable of helping us to realize something about life that we hadn't considered before by using an artistic form of communication rather than an informative type of communication. If you want to learn chemistry or physics or mathematics, you need to be able to communicate in a straightforward, linear way. But if you want to be lively or motivated or curious, you can't elicit those by saying to somebody, be lively or be curious. They need to have an experience that transports them into that universe, and then they can have a reference for being there.
Yeah, wonderful. I love how you're referencing the storytellers of our time as the parallels for what he was able to do. I'm wondering if you have any resources that you might direct clinicians towards that have more of an interest and want to feed that hunger that they have for hypnosis or more Ericksonian information.
Well, one of the things that I did was to take acting lessons. Not that I
Hmm.
ever had the aspiration or desire of actually being on a stage, but that I wanted to understand how do actors learn how to be actors.
Hmm.
So I went to an acting class, and we're doing vocal warm-ups. What to do to die today at a minute or two to two, a thing that's hard to say but harder still to do. And
Wow, you got it.
I got that pattern. And if you want to communicate something to an audience, you can't say to the audience, you should feel happier about the protagonist's relationship right now. You have to show what it is that you're wanting the audience to absorb, and maybe the audience will absorb it and maybe not. So I wrote a book because acting, often you learn by doing acting exercises. So I took my sister is a theater person, an acting person. So I said, how did you learn to do this? And she said, blithely, take an acting course. So I'm a leader at following directions. I took an acting course, and it was a series of exercises, not saying the first rule of acting is articulation and learn to articulate your words clearly to the audience. The second rule of acting is to use bigger gestures, because when you're on stage, you can exaggerate your gestures so that the audience gets the felt sense of what it is that you're communicating. But really, it was a matter of doing these exercises so that when we were on stage, we would be transformed into being actors and not learning a series of rules. Like the first rule of acting is articulation, and the second rule of acting is to use exaggerated gestures. But it was more of an organic sense that by doing these exercises, we would learn some of the procedures that would transport us when we were on stage, and they would just happen more automatically rather than in a deliberate way. So I think that therapists could benefit by taking an acting class, not that they want to become actors, but they want to learn something about the way that actors learn how to be at the best in their craft.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to seeing your big gestures on stage at the Evolution of Psychotherapy conference in December in Anaheim. I want to thank you so much for appearing today on our podcast. Dr. Zeig, it's been an honor and a pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so
My
much.
pleasure, Dustin. I hope that we've covered the topics that you wanted to cover, and we've done that adequately.
Yes, absolutely.